Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is probably going to be my political suicide. Honestly, with this one, I do intend probably to never be on YouTube again. I'm going to keep it straight to the point without anything on there. And this is not anything that I have not heard in every single reference. Granted, back in the wild 90s and everything else, and the roaring economy, and we were supposedly at peace, and everybody forgot about the war in Kosovo. Just in saying this with everything, I am going completely over the top to tell you exactly what is in the most possible way, as blatantly as I can put it. Hopefully, I didn't pause too long. It seems like everything moves by faster. Well, let's just get to it and rip the band aid off. Proper racism. And this is the political minute with Colin James Dawson. Proper racism. It's something that's been brought up before. People generally classify it in only the situation of the elite special words that are used. There aren't any of those out there that we can think of. Certain descriptive words or something else, whether it be for black or white. And as it is, this is what was kind of coined probably somehow higher up, and it trickled down in the 70s and stuff to the 80s and came around here. And then in the 90s, it got onto television. And proper racism. What is proper racism? Well, you can't have racism between groups that are the highest, most known about, most populous groups in a nation without having it totally split and fall apart. This is just something that has to happen this way. Anything else is insanity, really. You cannot have racism between basically black and white people. What you will have to have that has to be done is look about a group that is not needed, that is not wanted, an extremely small group. And I think it's the recoining of Mussolini fascism. What doesn't descend from you if you are the center point of the world? And I think this came up when we were considered the superpower, when we were considered the lone superpower. And now the superpower will probably be China. And we can say that it is a relay handoff situation as we go around the world trying to stop the spread of Mussolini fascism, other things like that, and anything that would be of Japanese imperialism, and anything underneath the Axis powers. Because it really is that they all are underneath the banner of Mussolini and everything of that which was the Roman Empire. In looking over this and everything, proper racism, we can go over how there was an amendment made that people say obviously it was just to keep out the Orientals and everyone coming here, so whatever could happen would happen, and that we could rearrange everything with that. Proper racism, making sure that everyone stays south of the border because they're really the Confederacy. Proper racism. We just need to not have anything at all that has anything to do with this one group of people. One could say the Jews or anything else, but generally proper racism, from what I can sit there and look at over this, is going after Native Americans. So many of them are like how they look at the term spike. A white spike used to be an albino Native American or someone who is incredibly light. A black spike was the same situation in another way. showed that which was an ancient race, similar to albinos in um, Kenya, being that they were an ancient race being reformed for their own individual selves. Yes, this does lead to several situations and can be exacerbated by colonization or anything else. Proper racism. There's not really any way to tell the difference between them until there's a necessary separation between Orientals and Native Americans. This is something we just have to have because this group needs to be separated out. It's even has possibilities that it was even Jewish at one time or something else out there. And it's just something that's not considered to be underneath genome inclusion because of certain treaties in 1993. So basically, the United States has its own group that it can kind of kick around and everything else. One can sit there and say openly that in every way, under proper racism, we've had this one person in politics who will be a very powerful person if the election does get certified and everything's done and there are fraudulent votes that are thrown out every year during the certification process that the media doesn't ever really cover, the media doesn't ever really look at, and kind of calls the election a little bit early. And sometimes I've been told that the media has in the past, in the 70s, and one time maybe in the early zeros or late 90s, bullied in some people by calling an election too early. And they just didn't want to have a riot start up over a senator election or a governor or something like that. And honestly, with proper racism being towards Native Americans, anything that's really used for it out there with Native Americans is basically we're taking these people away and making them black or white, or else we're going to be taking these people away and making them Oriental. And it is one of those situations that Native Americans are genetically tagged. And in a way, the United States has already gone out and done their genetic tagging on it. With this, every part of the United States, through Ancestry.com, DNA23, has genetically tagged themselves, just like how any Native American would do on a reservation. They are DNA tested all the time. Even if you're not a Native American with a reservation, anytime you go on a reservation, because generally they'll go back there, they'll go to that area, they are DNA tested. They are looked over numerous times for that. In numerous states out there, if they don't have a reservation in it, they do have to tell the people that they are Native American, because it can actually be a crime still to this day if they actually intermarry, because it's not allowed any form of constructation to themselves to see about augmentating their community through whatever you want to say is a genetic trait, socialized behavior, anything else, bringing in someone from California and you marry a actress or somebody. It's actually illegal, highly. If you don't explain this to people whenever you go out with them, depending on which state it was, it's actually illegal because you're making a false form of assembly. The fact that Native Americans are generally associated with the devil, granted, red-skinned devil is the color of that. People generally assume that one is violent because their eyes are generally black and they have red skin. Now and then, some people just think that they're always instantly turned on for them. These situations are either natural or else something that people in association just cannot handle. Most things that I've realized that are anything of beneficiaries or something else of Native Americans under proper racism or achievements by them or anything else, after so long, that couldn't have been by Native Americans. And yes, it's bad English, but even up in the USA's northern most elite conversationalists and those who never watch NASCAR out west because it's racist will say, well, that was done by a white person. And black people will go right along, yes, it was done by a white person. It was more than 75 to 110 years old. And it's just instantly given over to them as a form of privilege. Anything that's not basically incoherent, bloodthirsty, raging anything that is any form of expression, facial expression, or anything else is considered overly violent. I mean, this is, I listen to certain people, it always seems like the same replayed soundbite that you didn't understand because these guys were black and they were coming to us and we were in this community and we were on bicycles and we had talked to them, but whenever we were on bicycles, we knew we could go faster and run. And they were coming over to try and say, you know, so where'd you get your bikes at? We haven't seen any. Just to make a conversation or something else. Just like, you were walking down the street and knocked on a person's door and they had moved and you hadn't seen them the whole summer or something else because that was just normal. And you went to school with them, everything else, or else let's just say like northern normal, since everything's like northern normal. You knock on the door and they moved, they didn't tell you to enter school, and it's like you just weren't important. So everybody came out and been like, who are you looking for? Watch that. And everybody else, and you take off running because you're made an embarrassment mistake. And it's like people generally go out there and either mess around with somebody or else it just wasn't important to tell them. But things are always blown out of proportion. It's like they were about to lynch that man. Oh, they were about to rape us. Oh, they were about to do this. And in the last scenario, was it a black man or a white man that went to someone's house? Simply because I let off with the same seeming stereotype that's on every single situation out there. Was it even a guy or girl in an opposite sex situation or people in elementary school? Anything that is considered bad, like how animals generally always refers to Native Americans, even now is taken on the national screen on CNN because it has to be referring to somebody. And black people are always, every single race out there, know everything until it's someone they don't want. And if they can't deport all the white people, well, we'll just kick off Orientals, we'll kick off Native Americans, and any form of royalty and establishment is that. And that's almost like establishing a royalty here. Fuss at Europeans every day of the week, and now there's no more brown Europeans. They're all just white. And it is very disheartening with everything that you look at, and it really is just how they divvy up everything because basically Native Americans have traditionally been a very large part of specialized forces, specialized everything. They are brought under friendly fire more than other people. For specifically, it just looked too weird and was different. So you didn't even think that it was whatever. In these things, since they are special forces, will generally have a 75-year timeline put on them. That's just what ends up happening over and over. If there was something out in the whole situation over it, I would love to say that there was nothing with this. But it even comes back to the whole situation that if you can let them go out and start spiking then you can go out there and take it for your race and something, and they'll just eventually start having sex. We can always just fuck with the hormones or whatever it is. They'll just become, Pomfard, Sex or Age or something else if you listen to Star Trek. And they'll get somebody pregnant, and we'll have those traits and everything else for us with everything that they'll have. And then we can keep a little community of them in our little community for whatever it is, white or black. And basically almost like saying we'll have our gladiator warriors that will go off against each other and deal with it. But in order for this to keep going and everything else, one has to say that racism is only for one person. And it's like racism also means that you're supposedly exterminating the group you don't want there anymore. And generally, while people go on about all sorts of rituals being done with the blonde-haired girl in the north, and then the black-skinned young youth of the south, and someone cutting their balls off and doing something else, and then they blame the KKK, and I'm going, that's really Dixon, but generally from everything that I know in the upper ends of anything, is they just want to go out and play cowboys and say that they're really gathering their spiritual power for whatever it is, and they're going to harness the spiritual nature of whatever. And due to anybody who's a face person constituent, so long as you change your name to whatever it is, if they don't have the last name Fox until Fox Mulder came up on television, that's really you. And you have to wait until these other people come out and do all this because they look like whatever. They'll bring them in from wherever it is, and now you see whatever that person did, that's really us. That's really our group. And it's really a form of colonization through all the different faiths of Catholicism and everything else. Similar to everything out there. And they'll do all sorts of stuff. They'll be like, the federal government said, if I do this, then I'm sizing you up with the pictures because they just took a picture of you. And this is an obsessive compulsive thing from generally Christians or else other tribal groups, whether it's white or black, that they'll do anything out there because they'll just, and it's like, I just took your stuff because you used to hide guns and cameras, and after white people ran out after like 15 years, then black people came for 15 years, and then that was it. And then they all went out and said, look at the zenith of whatever it is that we created. It really does suck. And I would say the only way to have a true control of this country, irregardless, because it's your all's culture and you need to do it and stop taking it from everybody else and not let your culture be corrupted by stuff, is to have a bureau of white people and a bureau of black people. And I'm going to put that into another one here. And I mean, it is true. They do go out and kill people. They're the only groups that are the Native Americans that are routinely and permanently medically experimented on until they can get whatever is there. Now and then they may go off and say, this group has to do this group has to do that. We just can't get anywhere with them because the technology just can't hurt them anymore, and they're having kids, and they're just going whatever it is. On a reservation, you are governmental property. In public society, if you don't have a reservation, you are a federal entity that can be done and had anything done to it, and you don't have the same rights and protections that any single other group does. And, you can all say I'm throwing out Orientals, which just over the last week I've listened to how the Nazi cult is now the secondary tribal of Japan and secondary tribal, and how basically yellow people are now gone from black people because basically we've decided to make sure that yellow people are now no longer white or black where they've been classified at since 1991. and 1983 when they were classified as black. Anyway, I'm going to end this one right here and just be like, proper racism. Using people in religious ceremonies for human sacrifice. Proper racism. Taking anything and everything for one's own posterity, making it up, and utilizing it for sympathy and everything else in getting. And having a fake fight to just shake hands over whatever's being done. Proper racism. It's a more genetically diversified race than you all, which is why they could have kids with them and everything else. Proper racism. A group that was able to go around the entire world and even had space travel. Supposedly made something more than the atomic bomb as we have right now. Proper racism. Oh, they just don't test that anymore underneath 1/16. Bullshit. They test everything all the way back to whatever it is. Every time there's a new generation from 126 or 146, they make another one. Colin Dawson, Political Minute. Probably the end of this channel.